Thanks very much, Chair, and appreciate the conversation that we've been able to have here today, and dealing with what are big issues. And I just a reflection before I jump into a few specific questions. I find it a shame sometimes that we don't have newspapers anymore, because at least when somebody would open a newspaper, you'd be confronted with columns you might agree with, columns you disagree with, and everything in between. And I think sometimes that need for critical thought and evaluation is lost in political discourse. Just as an observation from somebody who's passionate about not just politics, but the political process and what that means to our democracy. Mr. Lowen, you said that there's challenges. Your wording, I believe, was poorly positioned to respond to some of these things. And quite often, when we are talking about dealing with misinformation, disinformation, balancing the need to protect freedom of expression, especially because I don't think anybody around this committee would want to limit free and open political discourse. So you use the term poorly positioned. Can you maybe expand on that, just to explain exactly what you meant and how we strike that right balance to ensure we're not limiting political discourse, but at the same time encouraging honest and thoughtful debates?
Thank you for the question, and I appreciate the chance to clarify. I would say three things very rapidly. One is that when I look at the opinions of Canadians versus people in other countries, there's just less sort of political room in terms of support from Canadians for government to regulate the online space or to try to regulate it, but there's also less trust that Canadians have in other actors to regulate, whether it's the tech companies or whether it's civil society groups to take part in that regulation. So it's like we're in a little bit of muck here, trying to figure out if we want to regulate online platforms, how we're going to do it, Mr. Kirk. That's the first point. The second one is that it took us a long time to get to the place where we are in terms of campaign finance, where we limit donations pretty severely, where we limit spending, and where we try to constrain debate and elections largely to parties and candidates. But I think most MPs would agree that kind of works in that it allows for a focused conversation during elections, if you will, right? And we have legal precedent to do that. But that model is not going to work in a world in which a lot of speech can be generated by non-humans and be generated very, very cheaply, because the two mechanisms you use, who can speak and how much can they speak via money, don't apply in the online space. So I think that's a difficult position. And then I think that just candidly, this is a political comment which I'm a bit reluctant to make, but why not? I'll make it. I think that it's difficult to deal with these issues when not the legitimacy of an election, because our election was legitimate, but the question about why the last one or two elections turned out the way they did is itself contested by the subject matter. It makes it hard for all of you as parliamentarians to sort through this.
I appreciate that. And one final question, if I could, to Mr. Lowen and Mr. Frank. Hopefully there's time here. We saw two examples, and of course everything is political around here. One, we've Justice Hoag's report, and we've talked a lot about that. But also the Deputy Prime Minister posted a video that ended up being flagged on Twitter as being edited. It was a montage, basically, taking, it was former Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole, a few different things he had said over the course of what was a more extensive conversation about healthcare, and it was posted as if it was to say something that certainly was not what was intended, and certainly not what was said in the context of the larger sentence. So if I could ask just quickly, how do we make this balance? Because I hear often somebody say that when they disagree with you, oh, well, that's misinformation, disinformation, or hatred. Yet when it comes to their opinions, if you oppose that, it becomes, this whole conversation gets uber torqued and emphasized to the 10th degree. So how do we make sure that we bring it down to say, okay, actually, how do we deal with the facts? If I could, 15 seconds, maybe both of you.
I would say very quickly, Mr. Kirk, that I think that example is a good one about the system working in some sense. Politicians frequently torque what their opponents have said, right? And they'll take little turns of phrase. But in that case, the Deputy Prime Minister was sort of caught out in a sense, right, for having put out a video that I think unfairly probably pieced those words together, and she had to spend some time explaining that. So in some sense, that I think is kind of how you want the system to work, right? If you're going to not truly represent what your opponent said or stands for, and you get caught up for it, then you have to explain why you did it.
Thank you, Mr. Lowen. I'm sorry, Mr. Kirk, but we got to move